Hi everyone, my name is Zora, and I'm a computer science and math double major in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm presenting my work, Predicting Emotional Incitement for Misinformation Detection. This is work done for the CS honors thesis, and I'm fortunate to be advised by Professor Brian Plummer in the CS department. So as we all know, misinformation and social media has been in the news a lot. And there's a growing concern of the spread of misinformation on social media. This is specifically concerning that social media has been a growing source of news for Americans. In a study that was from 2018, around 1 in 5 Americans say that they get their news from social media often. So misinformation is information that is presented as a fact, and they can seen as in different forms, such as algorithmically generated misinformation. So you might have heard about deepfakes, which are images or videos that has been manipulated to impose the likeness of another person, as you can see here. As well as there's also organically generated misinformation, such as fake news. Here's an example also of a social media post here insinuating that politicians would like to insert microchips into people. There is a strong connection between emotion and misinformation. And this is often due to the people creating misinformation often would like to people to act or believe a specific viewpoint, and thus their content often contains this appeal to emotion to get people angry, to get people riled up, which can also increase persuasion. So in studies where people were shown misinformation and also asked about their emotional state, it was also found that when people report that they're more emotional, they're actually more likely to believe the fake news. So this is even more dangerous because the incited emotion can make people believe them more easily. So motivated by this concern, which propelled my research question, can predicting emotional incitement aid misinformation detection? In order to do so, I collected my own data set and I performed machine learning model training and evaluation. So I trained an emotional incitement model, and I also tested this model with another misinformation prediction model using the emotional incited feature as a part of the input. So there is some related work leveraging emotion in machine learning for misinformation detection, such as for deepfakes, they are analyzing effective signal of the face, and for text fake news, there is also sentiment analysis. And there's a work released last year that's most similar to our work. That's called dual emotion. So this diagram is a little overwhelming, but the important thing here is for the content and the comments, the emotions were analyzed to produce these dual emotion features. So the dual emotion is publisher emotion of the content, as well as social emotion that's from the replies. So here, the social emotion is what I consider to be incited emotion. And this dual emotion is inputted to the fake news detector to finally output what they consider to be true or false. But the biggest difference from our work is that we don't presume that we have the comments of these posts. And also, if you have a social media platform, maybe by the time there's hundreds of comments, this information has already spread on the platform for a few days or a few weeks now. So what we consider is that we would like to predict that based on the content by itself, which is why I collected my data set, the emotional incitement data set. I collected tweets, around 12,000 tweets with the topic COVID that are of English text and has at least 3 replies, as well as with image data. So here's an example tweet. As you can see, this person is doubting the validity of war in Ukraine. And here's the image he had with this tweet. And here are the replies to the poster. And if you can see, some of the replies were also very angry, asking this person to get better journalistic sources, but some of them were also agreeing with them because there's a range of replies you might get on social media. So with those replies, I was able to label the incited emotions. So I used a trained emotion model to label all the replies, and I created a congregate feature. So here we have all these sentences, and we have 11 emotion labels that we have on the bottom here that we choose to label. And also emotions can be multi-labeled. So you might be sad and angry. So these are also multi-labeled emotions. So this is my model pipeline for the incited emotion model. So we have just talked about how we grabbed the tweets, the image, and the replies, and also how we generated the emotional incitement label just now. And this is all through Twitter API. And we have our model we want to train, the emotional incitement model. And essentially, we have the inputs of tweet and image, and we want the prediction to be as close as possible to the label. And the second stage is once we train the emotional incitement model, we would like to use this in the detection process to get the text and image as input to get the feature, and then put this feature into the detection model as more signal, and to finally output fake or real. So how I trained the emotional incitement prediction is I fine-tuned a model called CLIP. So CLIP is a large multi-model model trained on image and text pairs. Multi-model just means that there's two modalities here. So there's a lot of models nowadays in machine learning trained on millions of data. So here CLIP has been trained on millions of image and text pairs, and it has been really successful in a range of tasks. So what I'm doing in fine-tuning is that we have a really powerful model, but we need to tune it for our specific task. So I have what we call an MLP, a multi-layer perceptron here, which you can think of as like a function. So we have this clip that can output a really great feature, and we want to tune this so it's actually predicting for our specific emotion task. This is how I fine-tune to predict for the multi-labeled emotions. And once that is done, I wanted to test this model trained, and I decided to test on the COVID rumor dataset, which is a small dataset of COVID tweets, around 1,600 tweets, around 30% of them are false. And here are some examples, if you also would like to see how good you are at seeing if they're fake or real. So the first one is fake, and the second one is real. So I also trained my baseline and proposed method for the fake news detection. For the baseline, I trained fine-tuned BERT model, so very similar to what we just did with CLIP, but the difference is BERT is a large language model, so only text input. And again, I use MLP to fine-tune this model to be predicting our desired task, which is true or false. And in our proposed method, it's very similar, but in addition to the output from BERT, the large language model, we also have the emotional feature trained in our last step produced by our trained model. So we would like to see, our goal is to see if our proposed method increases the accuracy compared to the baseline. Before we do that, we first evaluated that we can actually predict social emotion well on our data set, that's the COVID rumor data set. So here we have some recall at K results. So here, what recall at K means that we're considering the top emotion. So the ground truth top emotion of the replies, maybe it's sadness. So recall at 1 means that around 74% of the time, our top one prediction is also the top one prediction of the label. And recall at 3 means that out of our top 3, it contains the top emotion around 90% of the time. Since these emotions, again, are multi-labeled and there's a range, we consider for a multi-labeled data set, we have good results. So next step is actual experiments on the fake news data set. So here are our results for baseline as well as baseline and emotion feature. So we see that we have an increase from baseline as well as we have a smaller variance across the A models trained. So in summary, we collected the emotional incitement data set for further research on social emotion and misinformation. We improve upon the baseline model with our emotional incitement feature. And for future work for this project is to, we believe there's room for improvement in our prediction results. And one part of the issue might be our current emotion data set have a skewed distribution of emotion. I collected this data during the rise of Omicron. And when I look at the labeling, a lot of them were very angry and sad. And so I would like to collect more Twitter data and possibly in different topics, review the data set, the emotion labels, and then release it publicly. I would also like to test this method on a larger multimodal data set. So the COVID rumor data set we talked about is really small, quite small, even for fine-tuning a large language model. So I would like to test on figure edit. And I would like to thank Professor Brian Plummer for his support and also graduate student Andrea Burns for making this work possible. Thank you.
Question.
I wonder how sensitive is are the models you're considering to the training data set that you start with? Like, for example, if you use a different set of training data set, would you get very different outcomes at the end, or would that be similar?
In terms of fake news prediction?
Yeah, or like emotional.
Yeah, so there's always a transfer issue when we kind of train on one data set and test on another data set. So here, actually, the good news for this COVID rumor data set is they're also tweet data. So they're quite similar to my emotion data. So this is what I presume why the emotion prediction. I trained on the data I collected, and I tested on this other data set, but it performed well. So this is a good case, but often there is a transfer issue, and it's an active area of research. They call it domain adaptation. So I imagine for me to work on this further on the fake edit, which is from Reddit data set, I will probably also need to tune in more and maybe train on some Reddit data to improve the performance. But yeah, there's usually a performance drop in general.
Thank you.